F5 lets me go right to the presentation.
You want to go full screen?
Yeah.
Sure, we wouldn't use that. Maybe not.
Maybe not. I'm bringing my own computer next time. Oh, what do you know?
Here we go.
We're up. Hooray for Hollywood. Well, hi everyone. How are you tonight?
Good, great.
Are we ready to roll, or do we need to wait a few minutes? You think this is about it?
I think 7.5 is fine. We'll have some other guys coming in late, but I'll be on that. I should start off by saying first, thank you for coming and talking to us. And none of us are experts in urban planning or any of this. We're mostly just guys who have been looking around and realizing that there are actually important decisions being made that have long-term impacts on this place we call home. And a lot of us are concerned about various aspects of growth, whether that's suburban expansion on the prairie and then overtaxing the aquifer and traffic considerations and long-term maintenance, or preserving open spaces, or the price of housing now, and will our kids be able to live here? And there's so many complex issues that all get tied into growth. And it really takes a lot of different perspectives and a really keen eye to dig into a lot of this and kind of understand the bigger picture and figure out what's going on. I think a lot of us have come to the conclusion that we have a duty to get involved in this, to understand what's happening, and whatever role that we each play. It starts with first figuring out what's going on and how are decisions made, and just understanding the whole system. So that's kind of our perspective on it and where we stand.
Thanks for the opening.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of our previous meetings have focused on like what do we want, what's the positive vision for the area, and like let's plan out, what do we want it to look like in 10 years and 50 years and that sort of thing. But for the most part, we don't know much about how the existing system works and what the process is here.
Okay. Well, that leaves the door wide open for me.
Yeah. Yes.
And thank you for having me. First, let me just say I commend you for doing what you do. I wish there were more groups like you. And that's why I'm pleased to be here tonight. I'll come back any time you want me. That's a standing I have with all of the local organizations in town, because I believe in what you just said. The best way to draw a community together is to actually have community. And you can't really have that unless we have these kinds of meetings, because this is where real interaction occurs. I'll get out of the way of the slides in a moment and go to them for details of how we are growing, what I think that means, and what we might do with it. But before I get there, I thought it'd be useful just to talk briefly about what I brought with me in the way of graphic aids. And one of the things I want to get your feedback on tonight. This is our current comprehensive plan for the county. Anyone here know what a comprehensive plan is? 3 of you, 4 of you. That's good. I only have to convince 3 more. I would dare say a comprehensive plan is the second most important document for any municipality in the United States, right behind the budget. Because the budget obviously sets the money in play to do these kinds of things. But without these kinds of things in policy, the budget is often misplaced or misused. And also, the other reason for doing comprehensive plans is every state in the nation has enabling legislation that dates back to 1923 with the Hoover Administration, where the Hoover Administration promulgated enabling legislation. All the states adopted it. It says a lot of things in that enabling legislation, but among the things it says is if, as a state or a municipality, you want to do zoning or land use development, you must tie it to a comprehensive plan. And the whole rationale behind that is that planned growth is a lot more efficient and cost-effective and usually more desirable than unplanned growth. So every legislature in the United States has agreed to that in concept and put it into their codes so that all the municipalities do this. What's a little awkward for me about this 2020 plan, I was part of it. It was an effort by our county planning commission and an effort to really clean up this 2010 plan, because this document has a lot of editorial flaws. When you go through it, there's a lot of overlap, a lot of unnecessary language. It frankly is, from a person that's looked at comp plans for 43 years, it's a wee bit embarrassing. But I wasn't here for this. Again, it's a 2010 plan. All the data behind this plan goes back to 3 to 4 years before the 2010 plan. So, one of the pitches I'm making tonight is I think it's time to update even this, because this is based on this. The data on this is now obsolete for reasons you can well imagine, and I'll show you some on the slides. But also, the main thing about any comprehensive plan is it should be aspirational and reflecting the aspirations of the community. That's where you all step in. Now, I don't think it's bold to say that a plan that's missing 40,000 people who are now new since the data of this plan was collected, new to our county, I mean, I don't think it's misplaced to say that this document can't possibly represent our community, because a third of it, almost, was missing when this was done. So I think it's time for an update, but I want to share a few more thoughts with you, and then if we have time, I'd like to hear from you as to what you think.
Question,
Yes, sir.
and apologize if you get to this later. Can you tell how, because I do all my development within cities and kind of downtown cores, can you talk about how the county comprehensive plan may differ from maybe the city of Coeur d'Alene or city of Ayden, city of Post Falls
Sure.
comprehensive plans?
Sure. Think of them as completely different documents. And at the moment, there is very little overlap, if any. And whatever overlap there is frankly accidental. Because the agencies haven't talked to each other in developing their respective comp plans. That to me is another reason to redo this and pull all the cities together and make them part of the county's comprehensive plan. One of those no-brainers that ought to be done, especially, well, I won't steal my own thunder here. Let me just start moving through some slides that'll start to tie back to what you just asked me. Get out of the way, and I wonder, oh good. I'll give you just a second to take that in. I dragged that out because it's from one of my textbooks. And it rings surprisingly true for today, at least for me. What do you all think? I see some heads nodding. We can circle back to that, but in my life, most of what we're going to talk about is cyclical. Timing is everything. And I truly believe this quote from Albert Solnit, who you wouldn't know is one of the famous planners of the 70s, 80s, even 90s. He literally wrote the book that's been used all around the nation as a guide to city planning and planning technology at that time. But his main point here is that if we're democratic, rational, and relevant, we have better plans. And we can do that on a local level. I know because I've been doing it for an entire lifetime. You know because you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in that. At least that's my sense of you so far. Tell me if I'm missing the boat. You need to know, this is a quick review of how we've grown just in the last 20 years. And the dark color represents the newest growth, so the last 20 years. The lighter colors are where the cities were 20, in this case, 22 years ago. It's pretty graphic, don't you think? And I can tell you, you wouldn't necessarily know, but we're filling up about 3 sections of land every year. I didn't mean to go forward, pardon me. Just in the unincorporated county, not counting the cities. By filling up, I mean with rooftops. And at this rate of city growth, with Kootenai taking up the large part of this, I'm thinking it's 5 to 10 years at most before we are wall-to-wall city in this area. So that leads me to something I'll ask your advice about at the end. It's an idea we're kicking around in the county. But in case you don't know, just to drive home, we are among the fastest growing in the nation. Last time I checked on an AI app, we're in the top 100 fastest growing counties in the nation. But certainly among the fastest in the state. There's lots of reasons for that, but just so you know, this isn't new. The data going back to 1970 pretty clearly shows that the blue line is the county, green line is Idaho, orange is the United States. We are clearly outpacing the state and the nation in our overall growth. I don't expect you to read this. The point of this was just so you know that Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization is our federally required planning organization in order to receive federal funds for highways. And they do their own population projections. And they use the census in 2020 to get this number. And then their projection, their own staff, are showing us that in 2045 we'll be at this number. So not quite doubling, but nearly doubling our population in 20 years. You know from your own experience what that will do to the community. And I'll talk about more of that in a minute. To me, there are lots of reasons for this. I borrowed these slides from Sam at the Idaho Labor Bureau because they're so spot on. He was glad for me to have them. But one of the takeaways here is that my generation is the wealthiest generation ever in the United States history. The reason that's an important takeaway is all of these people are trying to move to Idaho, or people like them. Meaning, we've got lots of people that are well-heeled, they can spend lots of money on new property, and we're starting to show the consequences of that. Here's another example. Consumer spending is way up. Everything I see is it's going to stay that way, in large part because of the baby boomers now trying to spend all their money or give it away to their kids. Our labor market is strong. This, of course, was COVID, the red blip, I mean. Our county labor market is equally strong with the states. So all the usual indicators, like this one, home construction is way down. That means supply is way down. That means housing prices are way up. I'll show you a slide on that in a moment. Our growth is basically 0% if you just look at people that live in the United States and were born here. All of the growth that we're getting in the United States is from migration. And most all of the growth we're getting in Idaho is people my age and older, especially in the unincorporated county, Kootenai County. And my age group is trying to retire as fast as possible, I get that. But that has ramifications. If you look at all those numbers of people, and they're very well heeled, and they're selling their $1 and $2 and $3 million homes on the east and west coast and Dallas and so on and so forth. And they're moving here because they like the lifestyle and so on and so forth. They can afford to pay prices that are unheard of here, and they have been for the last 3 years. That's why you'll see in a moment that land values have gone off the charts. Again, my age group and the projection for that. So that part's not changing. And here's one of the ramifications. Just in the last 5 years, we went from most of the population could afford a home in Kootenai County to now most cannot. And just so happens that I know this number is pretty accurate, even though it dates back to 2021, because I have an open space program I'll share with you in a moment, where the mathematicians for that have run these numbers and know that the median home value in this county is still hovering right here. So again, that has ramifications. I make a pretty good salary. I can't afford to buy a house here, and mine's in that bracket range. And the same is true for renters. If there's anyone in here that rents, you know that to be the case. I rent, and I am in this bracket of that's my rent rate nearly, pretty close. And fortunately, I'm in the percentage that can afford mine, but most, or 44% cannot. You put that statistic along with the one I just showed you, alarm bells should be going off in your head. We have a housing crisis. I think it's a fair thing to say. Another tipping point you are seeing because of all our growth is what it's doing to traffic. This is an overhead shot of the county. These lines are all the roads in the cities and the highways too. These color areas are where the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization staff has color-coded the difficult spots in our transportation system. The color coding is from light color to dark color, with this being 70% capacity, this being full at capacity. So if you think about school grades, some of you are old as me. No, you're not. One of you might be close to my age. One of you might be close to my age, but I doubt it. Where I was going with that is, if you go back to the 70s, 80s, when teachers actually gave out A, B, C, D, and F was failing then, it's still failing here in this chart. So that's an F, this purple color. It means you are sitting in traffic, you are angry because you're going through 1 or 2 lights, or 3, just to get through the intersection. And the takeaway is that 2 years ago, we needed 1.47 billion, because that's 1.47 million, so $1.5 billion, just to keep things from getting any worse. This is why Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization asked for that sales tax of $50 per vehicle, which lost in our county. It's why I think we absolutely have to pass it this next round. Uh-oh, I'm not advancing.
You have the menu open.
Oh, I didn't mean to, thank you.
Yeah.
There, thank you. Here's an update to that chart, where the staff's just kind of rolled back the colors a little bit so they're not so in your face, but the same issues still apply. 51 is still a nightmare. The interstate is where half of this $1 billion needs to go, literally, $1.1 billion to fix this. And then all these other interchanges need various improvements that KMPO is ready and prepared to fund, but part of making that work is there has to be a local match. Here and everywhere, in the United States I mean, the local match varies between 15-20% of the total cost of the project. And it's typically put up by the cities and the county, or in our case, the highway districts, or all of those groups. And without that match, the feds don't come. So everything you see here doesn't get done unless we find some way to find our local match. So next time you see KMPO rolling out a request to vote, pull them into your meeting, or pull me in and I'll speak for them, because I'm on the KCAP. it's an advisory group to the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization. So, it takes real money to keep things just the way they are, so they don't get any worse. I want that to be your takeaway for transportation. What do we do with this? I have two ideas. I'm open to your suggestions. You've heard me talk about a comp plan and why I think we need one. Now I hope the message is even more riveting. But if not, tell me what you think before I move on to the next item. Yes, no, maybe, comp plan?
Makes sense so far.
I should add in that, that there's all kinds of ways to do it. If we do it in-house and locally like we did last time, it didn't cost anything, but you kind of get what you pay for. It would be nice to be able to hire a consulting team to do real quality outreach, to connect with the community in the way that's necessary. Because you know from your own experience, the delivery of the message, the way you connect with people is everything, and especially on a comp plan update where we need to have people feel comfortable, that the people in charge know what they're doing, that this is all going to be for a desired end and a useful use of their time. Getting that message across over and over again is the art, I will say, along with the science. And that's why I'd like to hire consultants, but low-end consultants for a rewrite of this would be $250,000, top-end best consultants in the nation, $500,000. So it's real money. Especially when you consider our county budget is $95 million or thereabouts. It varies by year. Sometimes it's been as much as $100 million. But still $1 million or $500,000 is real money in a budget like that.
Where does the comprehensive plan direction come from? Is it have to generate from the commissioners?
No, it truly should come from the community. It truly should reflect the thinking of the community. That's another place where consultants or staff really have to be artful and skillful of taking what we hear from the public during what's usually a 6-month to a year outreach, and then forming that into goals, objectives, and policies, and then getting a back and forth with the community, make sure we really nail down what they want. Once we get there, then the county commissioner's role is really just to adopt.
But who would authorize
The commissioners,
the commissioners? So they would be the ones that would need to be convinced that the new comprehensive plan.
ultimately. And I know there's one commissioner that's about there. I won't name names.
I'm curious for the last two comprehensive plans, like what was the process used to do that outreach with the community?
I'm not entirely sure about the 2010 plan because the references are to a community outreach of meetings in a box, quote unquote. Meetings in a box was a trade name that a consultant put together. I think it was, I'm real rusty now, but it was a group back in 2007, 2008. The reason they call it meetings in a box is they rolled around from different parts of the community, showed up with an advance notice, we're going to be here, come and tell us what you think, and then they captured the thinking. And they had all the tools in that box to make that happen, so that, kind of a cute name. But my worry is one of the things I've heard, in albeit a private settings with people I have learned to respect over time, is that it was the same people showing up each time in different parts of the county. Whether that's true or not, there's nothing in here that actually documents how they collected the data, how they translated the data into policy, and I don't find meaningful connection between the policies here and certainly now here that we've redone from where we started. Does that help?
Yeah, and so was there a similar meeting process for the 2020, or was that just a revision of the 2010?
We did, the Plan Commission and I actually scheduled meetings around the community. I can't remember now, it's been 3 years. but I think we did 7 of them. So we tried to do in sort of major quadrants and then places that were outliers, just so people had an opportunity to show up.
Is there a collation of that data, or is it present in the plan?
Is there
Is there a collation of the responses from the people who were present at the events, like in a data form?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you mean for the 2020?
Yeah, because like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
plan might tie, like here's
Right.
some, 50 people thought this and we tie it to that, but is there just a raw, this is what was stated at those events by the community people?
There is. I'll have to go back in our electronic records. I know we captured that, and I assume we didn't delete it, because we never delete stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like if you were gonna do a new comprehensive plan, it'd be good to like question the unquestionable and just see the raw original
Uh-huh.
information.
Uh-huh.
What you're thinking about how it was collected is like, did we ask the right questions to arrive at the right measures?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, that's another reason why I'd like a consultant, is just knowing the right questions to ask is everything.
And what's
I-
the context of that now, to your point
and-
earlier?
Exactly. And I will tell you, even if we had the luxury of hiring up 3 planners, which is what it would take to do a new one of these, I don't have time to train them and get them ready to roll in time for this to actually be useful. Because by the time I got 3 new planners on board and trained up, another year would have gone by, or at least 6 months or more. And I'm concerned. You've seen why I'm concerned. I think we need to take action. To my view of the world, time is running out. And I'll relate it to something I experienced in Colorado. I worked for Boulder County, Colorado for 12 years. And ideologically, it's opposite of here. Set that aside. The only reason I bring that up is that in some ways planning in Boulder County was easier because people wanted it. In Boulder County, the ratio of PhDs is the highest in the nation. And that's in large part because there are 4 federal agencies in Boulder. NREL, 3 others I won't bore you with. But where I'm going with that is when you've got an educated population that's on top of these kinds of things, it's easy to get funding, easy to go do things and pull the trigger. Here, for me, it's been the reverse. Most people don't know what I do. A fair number of people don't want to know. I'll be so bold as to say. And so it is, a comedian would say, it's a more difficult audience.
How would you relate, when I think about the growth here, sometimes Boulder pops in my mind about a rapidly growing city or area. You talk about how they're always politically opposite, but do you think they kind of diverge and have kind of the same mindset of no more growth? And I think Boulder took the stance of very limited growth now, right?
They did.
And
The
I
city
think
did.
that's what a lot of people here are wanting is less growth, so they're kind of converging. in
It's
one
entirely possible. Yes, I hear that too.
And
So-
do you think that the way that Boulder approached it 15, 20 years ago was the wrong way? That there would have been things they could have done better to...
Oh, well, in fairness to Boulder County, they started their open space program 40 years ago. They started their rezoning for the entire county before I got there, which was, they would have been doing that in 2004 or 5. So, they have a long history of planning and doing contemporary planning over and over. Again, the population's always been behind it for at least the last 50 years that I can think of. So, for instance, by way of a quick example, in the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan that I started with when I first started there, that comprehensive plan said growth should be in the cities, not the county, because the cities have the infrastructure to handle it. I'm not suggesting that's what we should do. I'm just giving you a sense of things. Okay. So, back to your question, there's always a usefulness to finding the right fit for this community. And that's a delicate balance. Anything else on comp plan before I move on to
I guess
another
with
idea?
regard to just like the democratic process or making sure that the plan reflects the wishes of the community, I guess, how does that play into what if the community doesn't want this, you know? Is it just,
Doesn't want a comp
you
plan
know,
or
doesn't
doesn't
want
want?
the comp plan or doesn't want a thoughtful comp plan? You know,
Well, then we stop.
So then you stop, I mean, and that's my
Yeah.
sense, is if we're just gonna continue.
If we actually got to that point, I'd be the one to say this is pointless.
Okay, so we're not there yet,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, and I'll frankly be surprised, because I hear more of that sentiment than what you just described.
Which is
That people are fed up with growth. And when is the county gonna do something about it?
Well, and that's where I think this group, our goal is to provide, it's going to happen regardless, the growth. So, can we do it thoughtfully
Mhm.
and without continuing to, feed the monster, if that
Right.
makes sense, the economic situation that we're in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the pivotal issue here. You wanna work on this thing? So, anything else on comprehensive planning?
What was the last, sorry,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
Well, I just got one more question about,
Sure.
like, and this, maybe you answered it in the following slides, but I'm curious, like, if there's the city comp plans
Mhm.
and then the county comp plans,
Mhm.
and if they don't match, like, we don't, you know, the government just doesn't really get involved or the funding doesn't come, how much do those vary? And generally speaking, like, is it a lot or is it a little? Or are these cities kind of like, do they compete with each other for certain things? Do they agree with, or like, how, I guess what I'm seeing in my head is like kind of an antagonistic relationship
Mhm.
almost between these different cities who are
Mhm.
competing for resources from the county with each other. So then there's never gonna be this overlap because the people over here want this, the people over here want that, and they're not, you know, gonna compromise.
I'm glad you brought that up. I have a short answer and a long answer. Are we okay with the long answer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that to me made Boulder County fascinating is the, God, I'm sorry, I just had brain lock. It's something you said reminded me about what we did in Boulder County that was pivotal to the comp plan. Oh, the relationship with the cities. Thank you. We had intergovernmental agreements with every city in the county, in Boulder County, and they all had to do with growth. And mostly what it did was to say that we're not going to have much growth in the unincorporated county. Instead, it's going to go into the cities by these mechanisms. Intergovernmental agreements for planned unit developments, or transfer rights development, or pick something. It all varied by city, but each city agreed to these IGAs. That was a mastermind effort by the then county commissioners back in the day, and a very astute county attorney we had. And it took a lot of diplomacy to network and do that sort of writing an agreement. But when it occurred, it changed everything. Because then the county and the cities were actually working together towards the same goal of how we're going to manage growth in the county overall. We could do that sort of thing here. We just need to have the cities come to the table with the county in a new update. By that, I mean just have a representative. Just keep us informed of what the cities are doing. Make sure that we're not writing anything that conflicts. And that's the other major point to what you said. I think the main takeaway for you on how cities and county ought to interact is the starting point is there should be no conflicts between their comp plan and the county comp plan. And that's the no-brainer part. But ideally, there should also be some aspirational goals that are the same. Because there are people that live in the city that want to see things happen or not in the county, and vice versa. There are people who live in the county who want to see things happen in the cities. And that's where this sort of effort really, again, is useful with the right team of people that can connect solidly with the community, really understand what the community wants, and get real meaningful dialogue going.
When the city is talking to the county to define their area of impact where they expect to grow, is that a negotiation process with the county? What, is there just like the city informs the county? Does the county have any ability to say no or to say let's do this differently?
There's multiple answers to that. Let me start with the easy one. It is negotiated because the state law says it is negotiated. But most of our ACIs, that's short for Area City Impact Agreement, most of the ACIs are 20 years old. The exception is Hauser, which we just redid because it was an absolute nightmare, so I made that a high priority. We redid that ICI. It now has county zoning instead of Hauser zoning in the unincorporated county, which was bizarre in the first place. I would argue it was illegal contract zoning, meaning that the county gave up its legislative rights and let the city intervene. But fortunately, I didn't have to go there. Everyone agreed. We rewrote that ACI. But if we could get the cities to come to the table, we could certainly massage the current ACIs and possibly get agreement on how growth ought to occur in the county and between and among the cities. That's an extraordinary effort. It takes lots of time and diplomacy. My word or term for that is 2,000 cups of tea.
So I've heard stories of how that interagency cooperation can go poorly, like in the Bay Area, none of the public transit works because they refuse to cooperate. And apparently San Jose was able to go rogue and swallow up a lot of the surrounding counties and jurisdictions. And I'm wondering, is there sort of a pecking order there where could a city here go rogue and just decide to annex adjacent? I've always wondered what is
Yes,
this?
yes, they can, and especially in Idaho, where the state statutes are pretty open-ended.
So in that sense, if land is currently county, a city could just essentially take it.
It's an agreement between the landowner and the city,
Okay.
but any agreeable landowner can get annexed by any agreeable council.
Okay.
Anything else on comp planning? Daniel?
Hey, David.
Well, moving on then, another idea I presented to the county commissioners, and they have agreed. And it wasn't just me, it was actually my legal counsel, Councilmember Kiki Miller from the city, a few others. We all got in front of the Board of County Commissioners, said, Board, I showed them some of the slides you just saw. We have these issues, and we have a survey from a committee that I'm on that was countywide, had 2,000 plus people tell us in the survey that open space was their main concern. They would like to see the county do something about open space. So the commissioners, after I presented that, agreed. They authorized us to link up with bond counsel and along with bond counsel, you also have to have a municipal advisor. Those two work together to get you through a bond election. In this case, we have Holly Troxel and another firm, and we're actually working on this so that in another month I should be able to point you to a web page where you can go online and get all the details of how this would actually work. It's not for public information yet, but the takeaways I can give you that I think are just factual, so it's fine to divulge, is we've done the math enough to know that, going back to that median home price I showed you, once you take the homeowner's exemption that's allowed, that trots it down to 375, as a taxable value. If we take that as the average across the county, then, and all those people were paying into a 20-year bond, then it's $30 a year for a person that owns a $500,000 home. Or to do the math differently, it's $8 per 100,000. So $24 if you own a $300,000 home. And to me, to my way of thinking, and because that leverages $50 million over 20 years, that the county could use to at least keep some open space between the cities that you just saw on the slide, and some other places around the county, at least we would have the ability to actually do something that would be legacy work for your children's children. Because I dare say as a planner, I don't know any place on earth that people actually like to live where there's not good open space and parks. And you should know, in Kootenai County, we have never had a comprehensive parks master plan. That's embarrassing. A parks master plan is a basic ingredient to this, but we've never had one, and we need one, for reasons you can well imagine. The same thing I told you about comprehensive planning for the county applies to recreation planning. And imagine that we actually had a comprehensive plan for recreation and $50 million, we could actually do some useful things. So this is scheduled to come up for November 7th election, the open space bond thing, I mean. And I'll circle back around with you so you have the link, but I'll tell you now, it's kcbondinfo.com, where you can, I hope in the next 2 or 3 weeks, go online and find out everything we know about how we think this is a useful thing. That's about as much as I can say at the moment, because in Idaho, as a public official, I can't be seen as promoting this. I can just give you the factual data of why I think it's useful. So that's about as much as I know. But I'm curious to know what you think. Do you think this sort of effort is worth doing or worth trying to do in this county? What's your opinion?
What kind of open space are we talking about?
Large acreages. People have come to me with 100 and something acres and said, I don't want it to be developed. I just want it to be passive open space. Or, some people say, I don't really care how the county uses it. It could be passive, it could be open, real parkland, it could be whatever. But to answer your question, I think we don't have a plan for which properties or how they'd be used, because that's the sort of thing we'd actually develop if this goes through by an advisory board that presumably the county commissioners would put together.
So it could vary from natural open space like Chameleon Park to we're going to put in playgrounds and soccer fields and that sort of thing.
And everything in between. I mean, and just plain open space, it's not used for anything.
My one thought is like in Boulder County or surrounding Denver, there are pretty large open spaces, but
Huge
it
ones.
is also geographically